Thank you everyone for coming. I think Sherry did a nice way of kind of introducing the basics there, but I will give a kind of a forefront disclaimer. I walked into this with a predisposed notion of what Charles Forbes was about. And after I've been working on this for about 10, 11 months now, going through things. My views of him changed a little bit, and we'll kind of go over through the course that he might not be as dastardly as I once thought. But we will go through, and like Sherry said, we are continuing our dastardly series because we've already knocked down Daugherty, Gaston Means. We're doing Forbes today, and next year, a year from now, we'll be doing Albert Fall in the fall. So it kind of makes sense. It works well. We can't do that in the spring. It wouldn't make sense. But anyway, kind of the precursor here. We need to talk about. We just got ourselves out of the Great War, the war to end all wars. The war with World War I will be over. Actually, the 100th anniversary will be the end of this week on Saturday. Crazy to think that's been 100 years since World War I has taken place. But we are sitting here trying to figure out what to do after the war. As the United States, we sent over 2 million men overseas to fight the Central Powers. 116,000 of them died serving. 205,000 of them are officially listed as wounded, and this is standard wounds. They lost a limb, they got shot in the face, something like that. This is not counting mental anguish or any long-lasting effects. There is zero support system in place for them coming back. We're not sure what to do. There is no GI Bills. There's a very limited amount of resources. So these young soldiers are coming back, some of them in detriment, not being able to physically work and hoping to find jobs that may not exist, hoping to return to what they used to know, and it's definitely changed a lot. And the question comes up, well, what do they do next? Or more poignantly, what can they physically do next? And that's a huge question. We are in a position where the term that kept on coming up was modern war. There's a great web series done by Indy Neidell called The Great War. He does weekly events trying to take you through the World War I every single week. He's been doing it for the last 6 years. He's almost done this. This week supposedly is the last one. And it always references back to this is modern war. This is no honor. There is no respect for your fellow man. There is horrors. And these people are coming back facing all sorts of things. You have amputations. You have pictures there of these gentlemen without legs trying to figure out what to do next. Blindness and chronic breathing problems based off of gas warfare. Those gentlemen all grabbing each other's shoulders have been mustard gassed. Their vision is either completely impaired permanently or for quite a while after a lot of rehab to be able to see again. Things were used this time such as phosphine gas, which brand new invention of chemical warfare that when putting out there, if you breathed it in, it mixed with the saliva in the back of your throat and formed sulfuric acid. This is terrible, terrible things. People are coming back trying to figure out how do you live afterwards. And then also, this is the first time the term shell shock is used. That man up in the right there is a documented case of shell shock or post-traumatic stress disorder. The 1,000-yard stairs. This was a controversial term because people viewed that the mental anguish caused by war wasn't necessarily diagnosable. You can't tell if people are faking it or if they really mean it, and that's something that's will be addressed by Charles Forbes as well in the future. Then you also have the next layer of people trying to come back and feel normal again. Bringing this up as an example of people reaching out for normalcy, if you will. Men that were having various facial disfigurements after the war, they were getting these masks created for them made by Anna Coleman Ladd. She's the woman in the bottom right picture. She was an American sculptor in France. That they would make plaster masks of these people, make tin masks they could put back on, and then paint them up and try to give them a sense of feeling normal again. And then many of them would actually stay overseas in almost a finishing school aspect to learn how to do things as simple as dancing and conversation again, to feel like whatever they're looking like is okay. This is the mindset of the American soldier trying to come back to the United States, hoping to pick back up where they left off. There was some minor steps in a positive direction for the veterans. The first Langley Act was one of them, and this was the very last bill signed into law by Woodrow Wilson the last day he was in office. And this was set into place. There will be two of them that will appropriate, the first one, $18.6 million for veteran hospital construction, roughly today $228 million. It fell under the Department of the Treasury, and Warren Harding's Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, is going to lead the charge of getting this set up. He'll create what's called the White Committee, led by Dr. William White, an expert in tuberculosis. And tuberculosis is going to come into play in general. It's a general health scare at this time still. And there was questions of whether World War I, any of the attributes participating in the war could have caused tuberculosis as well. And there's controversy of whether TB can really be coined as a war casualty that needs to be addressed by the government. But Dr. William White was from Pittsburgh, same as Andrew Mellon, so that's why Andrew Mellon picked him, because he knew him very well through Pittsburgh. But they also have a neuropsychiatrist on board, and this is, again, taking a step towards maybe looking at psychoanalysis of veterans, and also hospital and medical planning experts. This group was set up to try to coordinate hospital construction and updates so the veterans would have at least some place to go to seek medical treatment. Then there was also the very bare basics of offering anything to veterans, the War Risk Insurance Bureau. It was actually created in 1914 for the U.S. Marines to have a life insurance policy put out for what they are going to be putting their life in danger. Steadily it expanded to include injured veterans from World War I as well. As long as you were honorably discharged with an injury that could be related to combat or service to your country, you would receive some form of medical care based off the government. Very daunting task. For example, by 1920, and this is right before Warren takes office, and he will replace Charles Forbes in a position here, there are 4 million claims on the books for the year 1920. 430,000 came from just in December that year alone. So think of the challenges of insurance today, and now you have a bunch of people trying to claim all sorts of things, and we're not sure how to exactly handle assessing these claims. So it's very tricky. The previous director of the War Risk Insurance Bureau, Richard Chomley Jones, and that's him eating lunch at his desk. He's eating toast if you're curious. You can see him kind of sitting there. Claims that this is one of the largest financial institutions the world has ever known, as we're trying to maneuver government funds to help all these millions of soldiers coming back from the war. Now, this is a very difficult system that's being set up post-war as we're trying to kind of figure our bearings. There are 3 different departments that a veteran would want to seek information from and help. There's the War Risk Bureau, and that's going to facilitate your claims on medical coverage to help cover whatever treatment you would need. There's the United States Public Health Service, that's going to facilitate the medical exams and the actual hospital care as long as you qualify. And then there's the Federal Board for Vocational Education, and that's going to help you basically learn a trade again post-war and find a job. The problem is all 3 of them are independent. So think again, you go and try to make an insurance claim and how long it might take to get one claim done. To be able to get a full treatment, you have to wait months and months and months from each individual department to get anywhere. And each individual department's kind of hesitant to act until the other ones act as well. So Public Health Service doesn't really want to touch it until the Insurance Bureau says you're okay and we're going to do something. Vocational doesn't want to touch you until the Public Health Service has assessed you already. So you can't really get anywhere until one starts. And like I was saying before, you've already got a large, long line of people trying to make claims ahead of you. So it's a very tricky system, and soldiers are feeling frustrated, they are feeling hurt, they want some sort of help. And a lot of people feel that they have earned that help by going off to war for the country. Now, March 4th, 1921, we have our new president, Warren G. Harding, and he brings to the country a new sense that we need to focus on the veterans. We need to find a way to give them their lives back. And he is very cautious on how to approach this. Also, Florence, his wife, is also very concerned. She calls them her boys, and they're visiting off the veterans. They're trying to offer their support and be a face of the government, offering their care as well. We need to offer them a system that's not going to bankrupt the country. There is a push for this bonus bill. This is basically saying that it was a standard for American war service that you would receive so much payment as a bonus for your service to the country. There was a push that we were going to have this bonus bill go through, and Warren, realizing the expense that this would cause and basically huge detriment to the country, kept on trying to push it back. He spoke to the Senate personally, saying that we cannot be doing this. This is not going to help the country. It's not going to help the veterans in the long run, offering this bonus, because every veteran would be entitled, depending on where they served, up to $1.25 a day, or $1 if they were overseas, or $1 a day if they were stateside for every day of service that they had. And they could come in and claim that and take that back. And so somebody had to have the money. And Warren said that I support the idea, but we have to have some sort of revenue-driving mechanism to counterbalance it. And he's trying to be very fiscally responsible. He realized that it would cost the country $2.4 billion out of pocket immediately if everyone was to try to come in and take that bonus. Today, that's roughly $29 billion. The bill will be pushed up to his desk, and he will veto it, saying that this is not something I can support. I want to help the veterans, but we can't be fiscally irresponsible. And they kind of table it for the moment, where Warren's looking at as an opportunity that instead of the bonus, let's offer better veteran coverage and better ways to help the veterans. And that can kind of counterbalance that. Although we're not giving you the bonus, we are giving you a support system to help you achieve a normal life again. And Warren needs to find a man that he can look towards streamlining this process. And he realized, thinking back, that he knew the perfect man for the job. And his name is Charles Robert Forbes. That's a picture of him on the left. That's his passport photo. Dashing man with a receding hairline that he likes to swoop over to the side. Interesting fellow. He is born in Scotland, February 14th, 1877. His father, actually his name is Charles McElroy. He is a British cavalryman in the 8th Queen's Royal Irish Hussars Cavalry Unit. The problem is that his unit's going to be dispatched to Afghanistan and India, and he doesn't want to go. So he decides that he's going to bail out and run off and desert his unit. And he changes his name to Forbes, which is a long-distance family name, and he drops the McElroy. In fact, when Charles Forbes was born, his middle name was McElroy initially, and he dropped it when they came overseas, eventually to the United States. So that name was kind of pushed aside. So for a number of years, they actually went into hiding throughout Scotland, hiding in plain sight under the name of Forbes, hoping to never be found by the British military out of fear of what the retribution would be. His father, being a cavalryman, was great with horses, so he was a professional coachman. That was his one round. He also became a golf teacher in the United States because he's Scottish, so it's naturally that he's going to be teaching golf, I guess. His mother, Christina Forbes, that's a picture of her on the right towards the end of her life. Very important figure, very kind of one of those close-knit women in the household that kind of kept everything together. He has 3 siblings. He also has 2 other siblings that die in infancy. So it's kind of your standard immigrant family. They come over to the United States in 1882. He's a naturalized citizen by 86. And he'll be growing up between the slums of overcrowded New York City and Manhattan area for a brief while. And then he will also be moving up to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. So he's kind of your standard immigrant story, immigrant family trying to find work in America. And he's going to start reflecting some tendencies of his father eventually. By the time he's 16, he's going to join the U.S. Navy. He will be a fifer in the Marines. He'll join in 1893. He's stationed on the USS New York. That's a picture of the ship up top. this is an exciting time for a teenager, chance to go out, see the world. He'll travel to the Caribbean, he'll travel out to the Pacific. At one point, he gets a chance to see the Kaiser of Germany, who was visiting the United States and wanted to tour the naval stockades just to see what they're doing, to kind of relate what he wants to do with Germany. Very exciting for him to see that. And he develops a sense of patriotism, and he, being a good Navy man, decides to get a number of tattoos as well, because why not? That's what you're supposed to do. This includes a 5-pointed star superimposed by other stars on his shoulder. On his left upper arm, he has a full-rigged ship with American flags, 1875 September 13th listed on it. On his right upper arm, he has a crescent in blue and red. Below his left elbow on the front, he has a hand holding a dagger piercing flesh, and an eagle and a shield in red and blue. Below and behind his left elbow, an anchor and a star-shaped flower. On his outer forearm, a bust sailor with 2 American flags, sailing ship red and blue. Front right forearm, eagle surmounting a shield and flags forming a breastplate. On his chest, he has an 8-pointed star superimposed with more stars on top of that as well. And he has the same thing on his left shoulder as his right. So he is caked in tattoos. Which I just love thinking about that man on the left. You can't picture him having a million tattoos. But it kind of lends to his charismatic story. I think it's interesting is you got to think this is an interesting man with great stories to tell, and he is excited to be a part of the whole naval experience. The problem is in 1896, while the boat is docked near Hampton Roads, big rough tides come by, he flies off the bow of the ship, and he develops pneumonia once he's rescued from the waters. This pneumonia is going to mess him up pretty good. He will suffer from, over the course of his naval stands here, he did catch malaria while he was traveling as well, but he will start having his very first instance of pulmonary hemorrhage or bleeding in his lungs based off of pneumonia. He gets to the point where as a fifer, he can no longer play the fife, so he moves to being a drummer. And eventually he realizes he's just not up for the strenuous nature of being in the Navy, so he has to pull out, and he is medically discharged. So he is now a disabled veteran that can't breathe well and can't work well, and he's going to try to find himself help from the government. And it takes over 2 years for him to receive any sort of pension or help from the government. So he is a victim of the system that he's eventually going to be coming in to try to help streamline. It took 2 years for him to get a $6 a month pension as a disabled veteran. Roughly $183 today is what he got for his time of service and no longer being able to operate. So he now has to find some sort of work for himself, and he's going to look into being a carpenter part-time, but he can't really work that well or hard because, again, he's having trouble keeping his breath and operating, but he's doing his best. So as a man that can't operate and have a full-time job, does the right thing and gets a woman knocked up. And he ends up impregnating Sarah Markham, nicknamed Sadie, and he marries her on February 24th, 1898, and they end up having 2 children together, Mildred and Russell. As things are going, he starts kind of getting the bug again. After the Spanish-American War, he had seen that his ship, that USS New York that he served on, was the flagship for the Battle of Santiago down in Cuba, and got the bug and excited, saying, I missed an opportunity of being a part of that. So he re-enlists in the military. He's healthy enough to kind of get himself by, and he fakes it the rest of the way and re-enlists, this time into the Signaling Corps. And at this time, Signaling Corps is a lot of flags, balloon work. They will steadily evolve into more telegraph line laying and telephone lines being laid. But it's actually kind of a dangerous line of work, a lot more dangerous than people realize. And he kind of found his opportunity to learn very extensive technology and some basic engineering this way. So he re-enlists March 2nd, 1900, and then decides on a whim in May of 1900, I don't want to do this anymore, and deserts, like his father. To why he deserted, not sure. I do think to a certain degree it might have been his health. He may have realized, man, I'm just not up for this, and tries to leave. So he disappears, And he becomes basically an absent father and husband, taking long-distance jobs doing construction and railroad work instead, until he's captured April 9, 1904 for desertion and sent to the stockade for a month and returned to active duty. He was no further disciplined from that. So he rises to the occasion, embraces his position in the military again, and rises up to the ranks of sergeant. He's very successful. Problem is, he's realizing this marriage thing's really being a hindrance to him, and tells his commanding officer, you know, I am going to divorce my wife. I'm going to do this. I want to make sure you guys understand that this is happening. But he never really gets around to it. So Sarah is left raising these children on her own as a single mother, not really divorced. And she ends up living with her family, working in a shoe factory, and Charles will have his 2 children that he never really talks to. Kinda. He's very cold. Once in a while, he'll try to reach out to him. Whenever he's in trouble, he tries to reach out to his kids. Not asking for anything other than emotional support that he will never find from them. Now, he will continue in his military stance, where he is discharged honorably in January 1907, listed as excellent and with service honest and faithful, but he stays involved with the military and the National Guard, and he moves on to trying to find something else. And that something else is going to lead him to Washington State, but not before he takes a brief visit in Nebraska, because after the military, his family had moved out there, his parents, so he followed out there briefly, and he met Catherine Goodwin. Strong, that's a picture of her up there with their daughter, Marcia. Strong, opinionated woman, professional stenographer and writer. Supposedly the two of them made a stunning power couple together, is the term that was used. Don't exactly know how they were a stunning power couple necessarily, other than being opinionated and charismatic maybe. But I would never picture this plain Jane look of her and receding hairline Charles as like a stunner, but yeah, each their own, I guess. But they will move to Tacoma, Washington, and he'll find an opportunity working for the Hurley Mason construction firm. Down there on the bottom there, that's George Mason and George Mason and Charles. I didn't go backwards. It's George Mason and Charles Hurley. I wrote it backwards. Hurley was one of those men that kind of worked up from the bottom himself and pushed real hard to make him a self-made man of himself. And he found Charles to be kind of in a mold of his own and took him under his wing and helped develop his education in engineering and construction. And being a go-getter, was able to rise up the ranks and become a superintendent of construction for this company. Now, stories get embellished, mostly by Charles himself, trying to legitimize his training, saying that he went to MIT, he went to Columbia, and he learned that had this great engineering background. I will tell you from experience, if you call MIT or Columbia asking for Charles Forbes, they will call you back and tell you you're insane, or not call you back at all, which I got from both of them as well. But he did not attend either one of those colleges. But he wanted to try to legitimize it, and later will say, oh yeah, I went over there, I'm an expert engineer. But he is self-taught. And he's very good at it. He's a go-getter, and he kind of always has this stigma behind him that he has to fight to legitimize himself. Although I didn't go to school, I'm just as good. And he will fight with people for this for his entire career. Still being a member of the National Guard in 1912, the National Guard sends him off to Hawaii, hoping that he'll help supervise the construction of the Pearl Harbor Naval Base out in Hawaii. Seeing that he has his experience in the engineering background, it was going to be a good fit for him. After going over there and working in Honolulu, finds himself a new home and stays on there. Instead, he resigns his position at the Hurley Mason firm, and now he reinvents himself in Hawaii. Here is why when he's telling his stories, I went to MIT and Columbia, because there's a definite hierarchy in Hawaii at this time, which is a territory. You have your sugar and pineapple plantation and your white politicians at the top, and then you have your natives of Hawaii down below. So to fit in with the upper echelon, he's got to look like he belongs there. And his experience as an engineer gets him appointed to positions such as the Superintendent of Public Works and Chairman of Harbor. So he's going to be coordinating the building of harbors in Honolulu and around Pearl Harbor continuing. He will now kind of feel like he has to be one of them, over-embellish himself, as I said, and now he's going to fight with the local engineering board instead. An example of this is that he will be designing walls to construct plans for Piers 8, 9, and 10 around Pearl Harbor. The board says that he needs a more secure wall. He disagrees with them. The engineering board that reviews all of his plans says you need to do this. It's only going to cost $8,000 to $10,000 more. You need to do this. Forbes disagrees. Forbes comes out and says, arguing with them, but if I can recommend to you a better and cheaper wall, you gentlemen expect me to make that recommendation. If I can save you $10,000 or $8,000 on a type of wall that will give you the same service as a gravity section wall, you expect me to do that, don't you? Yelling at them about how don't question my thoughts, I know what I'm doing. G.H. Gear, that committee of engineers, retorted in the newspapers, because of his abundant energy, he is undoubtedly fitted to do good and useful work along some lines in this or any other community. But it is our belief that the design of engineering works is not the direction in which Mr. Forbes' talents lie. So he will always be fighting that, feeling like he doesn't belong as a peer to these people. And it's something that's always in the back of his head. There's always this sense that he feels like he has to prove he belongs. He does become close friends with Governor Lucius Pinkham, the territorial governor. That's him on the upper right. While in Hawaii, Catherine and Charles has their own daughter, Marcia. She's born November 12, 1912. As a sense of how close he is with the governor, the daughter refers to the governor as Uncle Pink, which is always a nice way. But he gets real close with Pinkham as well. Forbes is actually used as a spokesman to go to the United States Congress to speak on behalf of the governor on political corruption, because they're blaming him for a few corrupt things as well. So he's trying to figure out what he's doing. Now, as this role as superintendent and chairman of harbors, he does have an opportunity to entertain the incoming senator, Warren G. Harding, who sits on the Committee of Foreign Relations, which does deal with territories such as Hawaii and trade. He comes on in, and it also is a good opportunity for a nice little vacation as well, let's be honest. So Warren goes with his wife Florence and travels with Dr. Charles Sawyer, his personal physician and his wife, and is wowed by Charles Forbes. He creates this friendship, and it kind of, you can see why. Because Forbes, again, interesting man. I can see him sitting with Warren having a drink, smoking a cigar, rolling up his sleeve, showing off the tattoos, and talking. One of the guys, I'm sure Warren was instantly drawn to this man. And then on top of that, Charles was known to be really speak equally to women, almost flirtatiously. And that's something that I think could be drawn to Florence and feeling the attention in equal sense there. But it's a little tricky. It's hard to say with that one. But they do create a long-lasting friendship. Now, World War I starts up, and Charles doesn't want to miss his opportunity, so he re-enlists to active duty on June 9th, 1917. He sends a letter off to his friend Warren saying that he's going to join, and Warren sends a letter back saying, I don't suppose anything will hedge you off. I know the germ of adventure is in your system. I don't think there's a cream for that. And I don't suppose you will ever get it out unless somebody shoots it out on the western battlefront of Europe. You will excuse me from writing you in this strain. It is not my business to tell you what to do. Under normal circumstances, I want to help you do the things you most wish to do. But he keeps in tune with Warren. The funny thing is when he goes off to war, he doesn't resign his position. He just kind of passes off duties to other people and believes he still should receive his salary because he's fighting for the government. So the local government actually passes a bill to force him out of the position, which Charles gets mad about, sues the government, and gets back pay later eventually. But there's a picture of Charles working with his signaling corps. He's the man that's bent over in Europe. He is going to go over there to Europe, and it's a, again, very dangerous job. He is going to move up to eventually take the command of the 33rd Division Signaling Battalion. This position, he has to have great long-term planning. He has to understand that as the troop movements are going, he has to coordinate the telegraph wires and telephone wires traveling with them. So it takes a lot of planning along with it. He's not afraid to run out into the no man's land and lay wires himself. He's a hero. He's an exciting man. You got some newspaper photos. They look a little choppy, but it's the best I could find. He's up there on the top right with his cap pulled over his brow, inspecting troops, and that's him looking frumpy in front of his tent, sitting in the middle there, overseas in Europe. He's going to fight in the Meuse-Argonne, he is going to fight at Verdun, he is going to be in the thick of things. General William K. Naylor of the 33rd Division that he was a part of, the Chief of Staff, described as untiring in his devotion to duty, exposing himself fearlessly to enemy fire in order to supervise signal operations in the forward area. This officer contributed largely by the ability of his management. Forbes is going to tell a story later on, remembering war, about where he was during the ceasefire. He writes a letter to his daughter, kind of reminiscing, and talks about that at the ceasefire he was in a shell hole at St. Hilaire. At 11 o'clock all firing stopped. The night before he was in that area, the Germans had blown up the local waterworks, which flooded out the area and ended up drowning all the wounded Allied soldiers from that. And it was something that stuck with him. And writing to his daughter, he says, "What bitter memories we carried back. The memory of that war is still clear and vivid. Sherman was right when he said that war was hell." He fought with distinction. He is awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, second highest honor that you can earn as a soldier for extreme gallantry and risking your life at battle. He's going to come back as a battered soldier that has experienced war and is trying to figure out what to do next. He is one of the lucky ones that was actually able to get his job back at Early Mason. So he got back in there and works his way up, eventually becoming Vice President of Washington, supervising the Spokane work in the area. Except he never really fully recovered from war himself. He's going to have 3 hospital stays. He's going to start having chest pains. He's going to have poor blood flow to his heart. This is going to be a long-running issue for him. He's also going to have, they're documenting him as shell shock, but he's going to have 3 different fits of post-traumatic stress disorder from his times over in the war. So again, this is a man that's experiencing all these things and understanding what plights the soldiers are going through. But he kind of recovers. He finds himself on equal footing and trying to figure out what to do. And when he finds out that Warren's running for office, gets excited and offers up his help to Warren Harding, saying that he's going to personally speak to every Republican delegate from Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. His wife is going to visit family in Indiana, and she's going to talk to local Republican delegates out there. He's excited. He can't wait to help Warren. But Warren's campaign manager, Harry Daugherty, up there on the right, can't stand him, says he's meddlesome and needs to go away. Warren is going to be elected, and then the thoughts are, what do we do with Charles Forbes? I would love to find him a position. And the thoughts that popped around was Territorial Governor of Alaska, Ambassador to Peru was one that popped up. Forbes really wanted to be a member of the United States Shipping Board, but was rejected from his formal application. And then Warren decides, here is a veteran that was great with organization. This is the man that I need to come in and take over what I hope will become the Veterans Bureau. He is sworn in as director of the War Risk Insurance Bureau, the first of the 3 departments I discussed. And he'll take that post April 27th, 1921. There's photos of him swearing in on the right, which is wonderful. He has a nice photo of Warren sitting on his desk as well. But he's ready to go. He is going to make a salary of $7,500 a year. That's roughly $103,000 today, the same as a congressman at that time. He's ready to hit the ground running, and he wants to streamline and reorganize the system. Through the help of other figures in the government, the decision was made that they had to consolidate and create the Veterans Bureau. That's going to have all 3 of those departments I talked to under one umbrella, self-governed, only answering to the president, and that's going to be run by Charles Forbes. So they're going to start consolidating, and Forbes is hoping to create a truly comprehensive health care plan for veterans, which is a brand new concept. So talk about some good things that he did. Well, he ran in there and tried to militarize the system, tried to make it as orderly as possible, worked really hard at doing all that. He comes in below, and actually is below the allocated budgets. For example, he can create 140 sub-offices to his departments, and he only does 126. He centralizes the offices to one building so he can save on rent. When looking for land for hospitals, he looks for donations. He does not purchase. There's only one piece of property that's ever purchased, and that's in Livermore in California. And he just keeps on trying to push and push to make a better system. He expands the medical emphasis on neuropsychology, meaning PTSD, which he was suffered from and he realized the validity of. He's also pushing for TB to be focused again. The thoughts were that tuberculosis was caused or intensified by the close quarters of trench warfare. And then you throw gassings in there, it's not going to help. A lot of people, again, being controversial views, he was pushing that we need to take that seriously. He's also progressive in creating the Negro section, in which he brings in an entire African American staff to take care of running and making sure that African American veterans were receiving the exact same care as any other veteran. They were touring the country as well, and that was kind of pushed off to the side that people didn't really realize. Charles Forbes pushed that the veterans needed better care, and they deserved the right to choose their care. He was saying that I believe this, that no man knows how a man feels better than himself. If a man goes west, goes east or south, and feels agreeable and contented there, that is 75% of his treatment. He believed that you deserve comprehensive health care as you choose, at places you choose. He is going to start butting heads with so many people over this, and there was an aggressive approach to him. On his second day in office, he had to speak to Congress, and people were questioning, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? And he answers them, I just took over the office yesterday. At the next hearing, I'll be better able to give you some of my own ideas after consulting with my associates. And people just kind of giggle and laugh about how he's approaching this thing nonchalantly, but we trust his confidence. Major William F. Deegan of the American Legion told him, there is something about you, Colonel Forbes, that when you are away from us, we cuss you, and when we are near you, you have an iron hand on us. You have a magnetic personality. So his charismatic ways is going to start kind of wooing this thing to work. Down at the right there is a photo of Carl Bronner. He is the poster child of the Veterans Bureau. He's a man that came back from overseas, blind in both eyes from gassing, and lost both of his hands to grenades. The Veterans Bureau coming in, trying to give him comprehensive care, actually trains him and creates for him a specialized typewriter using his feet and large levers to allow him to be able to have some form of communication outside of just speaking, but the actual letter writing and study, that he was actually able to go on and pursue a degree in law. Never could find if he actually got it or not. I can't find, they kind of dropped that, so I have a bad feeling he didn't get it, or they would have hyped that up. But he's the poster child, a guy that came in after the war looking to find normalcy, and with the help of the Veterans Bureau was able to help him find life again. Then we have some not so good things. When Charles Forbes is going in there and trying to militarize, he starts firing surplus staff, as he calls them. He starts dismissing high-ranking medical officers and replacing them with military officers that he's experienced with. And they're saying that, well, you're not a doctor. How do you have the right to get rid of doctors and tell us how we're supposed to treat people? So people aren't trusting his judgments and opinions. He's getting increased pressure of hospital placements. He's trying to shut down veterans hospitals that he feels are subpar. And different government officials are saying you need to keep these open because it kind of helps my constituency, and there's issues with that as well. He is forced to pick up where the White Committee left off. That was the group set up by Andrew Mellon to create new veterans hospitals. They would say, okay, well, you can take care of the hospitals. Here's our plan. This is how much it's going to cost. And then when Forbes looked at it, said, this is not going to work. We need to spend more money. White Committee said, well, that's not what we said. Good luck with that. And he looked bad in the process. So it was kind of tricky there. And then last, we have Dr. Charles Sawyer butting heads in there, too, as a member of the Federal Board of Hospitalization, who disagreed with this over-the-top sense of medical need. Because of being a homeopathic medical professional, he believed that limited medical care is going to help you do better. And he felt that this over-the-top was just going to make a group of weak men that couldn't take care of themselves. So as Dr. Charles Sawyer said, let's give them more punch and determination rather than dependence and lack of character. And then you have the caricature up there of him telling the soldier who obviously needs help that he's slicker than him and you can't fool me, you don't need help. So we have a couple issues we need to go through that are kind of tricky. Charles Forbes is going to travel around the country investigating veterans hospitals and trying to find places to place new ones, make sure other ones are updated. And in this process, he will travel the country and bring with him two people that he meets, Elias and Catherine Mortimer. They're up there. Elias Mortimer is a con man that finds ways into the inner circle of people and then basically finds ways to turn things around and steal money from them or detriment their career and blackmail them to get money as well. And for some reason, Charlie Forbes likes him and brings him along with him on the Western trip. He is a raging alcoholic and he beats up on his wife constantly, and Forbes kind of takes a sympathetic ear to poor Catherine Mortimer there as well. While traveling through Chicago, Elias Mortimer introduces Forbes to John Thompson and James Black, and Forbes kind of does little controversial things and does side jobs for them for pay, feeling that's not a conflict of interest if he's working for other contractors, if he doesn't make a big deal about it. And then later on, when the time came for a bidding process in Northampton, Massachusetts, this Thompson-Black duo got one of the contracting bids. And it starts looking a little weird. They are the second lowest bidder, so they were not the best, but they promised to be the fastest. So it turns into a kind of an issue of, well, why do you pick this guy, even if he was faster, which Forbes says we need fast, but you spent more. This was weird, and it was kind of looking kind of goofy. Then you also have Elias Mortimer coming in saying, well, I received a bribe from Thompson and Black, and I paid Forbes for them to talk. So rumors are going around, so that's not looking so good. Next, we have this Livermore property. Chief Counsel Charles F. Kramer coordinates the purchase of this property. I believe that's him on the right, but I'm not positive. That fits the description, but I can't pinpoint him exactly in that role, but that should be him in a group of the Veterans Bureau. They purchased this property for $40,000, even though it's appraised at $8,000. So that's not looking so good. And then Kramer, taking care of the business dealings, hires an architect, Matthew O'Brien, who's super expensive. But Forbes recommends him because he knows him and he knows the area. So again, not looking really great. Then lastly, we have Perrysville, Maryland. There's a military depot out there that's holding all the surplus goods for the military. It costs $643,000 a year to operate. And Forbes is trying to save money, saying this is ridiculous. We cannot afford to continue to do that. That's roughly $9.4 million today being spent on this depot. And Forbes wants to shut it down and sell off the surplus. He does keep 1 year's worth of surplus for his veterans hospitals, leaves 20% remaining for public health services, and then sells the rest for roughly 80% below the value. Is not looking good there either. The firm that buys it, Thompson & Kelly, is a professional firm that buys surplus cheap, sells them for a very low margin. It's kind of standard business. It is reviewed by other government offices. It says it's okay, go for it. So Forbes starts shipping these things off on 15 train cars to Boston, November 15th, 1922. Doc Sawyer is pissed, storms into Warren's office, tells him you need to stop them immediately, and Warren gets hold of him. Forbes agrees, okay, I'll stop, because we have Sawyer coming out saying that you're wasting surplus. We already bought this. Why can't we give this and use this throughout the country? This is ridiculous. Why are you getting rid of this? So that's looking a little fishy as well. So Forbes is going to start feeling under pressure, feeling a little stressed, a little strained. He requests a leave of absence from Warren to go over to Europe to rest and regain his strength. At that time, Warren's wife Kate and his daughter Marcia were already in Europe. There was a kind of a distance between the two. He was super busy, not really around. His wife didn't feel like she had a good place in Washington, D.C. Her writing, for example, took off for a little while. She got a good relationship with Florence Harding, was able to write a kind of a series of stories about what life is like in the White House. And once that was done and published, nobody wanted to talk to her anymore. No one wanted her writings, and she felt dejected and she felt lonely, and decides to kind of branch out on her own and leaves for Europe in 1922. She's going to be out there for 19 months total. But Charles hopes to maybe visit his wife, regain his strength. Warren agrees that you can go, but you need to resign. This isn't going well. You need to resign your office. So Forbes agrees, leaves him an undated letter of resignation, travels out to Europe. Up there on the right is the letter that Charles Forbes sent to the Secretary of State, Charles Hughes, asking for him to expedite a passport for him because he needs to leave immediately for a short business trip. It was kind of interesting, that's still on record with his passport records. He goes over there and Charles Forbes officially, with regret, wires his resignation to Warren February 15th, 1923, which Warren quickly announces, and he pushes on to the next direction. While in Europe, Forbes will visit some of his old World War I battle sites. It's the only time that his daughter Marcia said that she ever saw her father cry, was seeing him visit those sites again. Leading me to again believe that he really does feel for the veterans. He always said that his services, the veterans walking around based off of their services, is like a propaganda to how the government's taking care of them. If they're happy and being taken care of, then the government's doing good. If it is not, the government's not doing good. They are a statement of his work, and he took that to heart. He's going to try to return to the United States in February and try to figure out what's going on from there. Supposedly he met with Warren in the White House, and the story of Warren grabbing him by the neck, slamming him against the wall, and calling him a rat bastard for double-crossing him, and all those other stories, because a reporter just happened to walk in on this meeting. You find out that the story being traced back by Robert Farrell, who wrote The Strange Deaths of President Harding, traced it back to a popular writer that was quick to over-embellish things. Said he heard it from somebody, or heard it from somebody that sent somebody over there, so it's got to be true. So chances are, if they did talk, it was probably a little heated, but I don't picture Warren slamming anyone up against the neck and all that type of stuff. It probably did not happen. So the Veterans Bureau moves on, and now we replace Charles Forbes with General Frank T. Hines, that's him on the right, who's the complete polar opposite, where Forbes berates and challenges staff. Hines is gentle and works as a team. Forbes drives an expensive car to work. Hines takes the bus. Little things like that. And it really sets a new tone for the Veterans Bureau, which starts the downward spiral for poor Charles Forbes. He starts getting a little closer to Catherine Mortimer, who we talked about before, and farther away from his wife. Charles is going to stay down in Virginia with Catherine Mortimer by her family. It's actually Catherine Mortimer's brother's best man at his wedding, which was a little weird. And he's trying to find a new sense of life. So he travels to Cuba through the Panama Canal and heads to San Francisco hoping to start a transport and export business. Tries to reconnect with his kids from the first marriage because he's looking for emotional support and finds zero. And then his wife, Catherine, decides to divorce him as gross negligent and saying that his treatment of her made her ill. And that's why she had to travel to Europe for 19 months to get away and feel better. So they are officially divorced October 22nd, 1923, which is the exact same day that congressional hearings begin investigating the irregularities of the Veterans Bureau. The hearings are very complicated, very drawn out, and to give the bare basics of it, it is basically a giant show with Elias Mortimer on the stand being the man saying, I was a part of a lot of bad things that Charles Forbes did, and then he double-crossed me and stole my wife. And people felt bad for him. Like, they actually felt empathy that this aggressive military man that was stealing money and corrupt, he double-crossed even the corrupt people and he stole his wife. This is terrible. And they start attacking Forbes as a bigamist, saying, did you know he was married to a woman named Sarah Markham that he never divorced? Then he got married again, and now he's stealing my wife. Forbes is looking like a nightmare up there. Catherine Mortimer takes the stand against her husband, saying he's a liar, you can't trust him, but that doesn't really go in there. Charles Sawyer takes the stand and brings examples of supplies that were sold off at Perrysville, and the description was it was almost like a yard sale. He's holding up blankets asking jurors what they think, if this is good enough to keep or use, and why would you sell this? So it's a very interesting show. Forbes never takes the stand off of advice from legal counsel. He does give a press conference declaring his innocence, but he never talks directly to the hearing committee. The thing is that he's being described as looking beaten up. His illness is poor blood flow, his lack of breathing strength is catching up with him again. He's described by the New York Times as his face was tightly drawn and his vigorous figure had appeared to have suffered under a long, nervous strain. And then Senator Henry F. Ashurst, who was there, who is my favorite guy, the silver-tongued sunbeam of the painted desert, as he was called, describes Forbes as a man with disheveled hair, loose lips, and trembling hands. This is not the man that was the proud war hero a year earlier, fighting for the veterans. These hearings will lead to a grand jury indictment on February 29, 1924. Problem is, Forbes is deathly ill, and the trial gets pushed back, because they are afraid that he can't travel, that the doctors are saying if he gets onto a train to travel to Chicago where the hearing would be, he will not make it. Forbes wants to talk, he wants to defend himself, and fights to regain his health and strength, and he will eventually make it to Chicago. So the trial that was supposed to start in February goes actually on November 24th, 1924, so it took almost a year for him to get out there. He's brought up on charges of conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government, conspiracy to commit bribery, and an acceptance of a bribe from Elias Mortimer, who's claiming that that deal with Thompson and Black, that he says that he gave Forbes a $5,000 bribe in a bathroom in a Chicago hotel room, and that's proof that he did it. He also claims that he has a checkbook with notes that proves that he gave him money, but the checkbook was stolen by burglaries that happened in his house, so I just don't have it. And people accepted that. And Mortimer's legal defense also was Thomas Felder, who was Gaston Means' lawyer as well, in case you're curious. So it's a nice, fun little twist in there as well. The trial just goes the same direction, ridiculous, and Mortimer poring over the fact that how evil Forbes was. And the trial hinged on whether you believed Mortimer or not. And the defense attorneys really thought that they were going to get an acquittal because they felt that no one's going to believe this man that looks like this holes in his story. But he was found guilty by unanimous vote of the jury. And he is sentenced to 2 years and a $10,000 fine. It's a little tricky with how that was going, but he tries to appeal. He's denied. The Supreme Court refuses to review the case, so he's going to go to prison. He's admitted to Leavenworth on March 20th, 1926. And right before he goes off to prison, he quietly marries Catherine Mortimer, December 31st, 1925. So he's up to his third wife now. But you look on the picture on the right, that was in the newspaper for the Chicago Daily Tribune, he looks like an aged man. His ex-wife had actually said he looked like he aged 30 years over the course of 8 months, and he said he felt like he aged another 40 because of all the strains of what he was doing. His poor health, his stress, he's only about 48 in that photo, and he doesn't look it. He's doing really badly. So he's going to go off to Leavenworth. He's again very, very ill. He is partially paralyzed on his left side of his body. He can't walk, can't breathe, and eventually he starts moving up and starts feeling a little bit better, and eventually finds himself some sort of purpose. He works in the office of the superintendent of construction, so he helps plan and cost out projects for the prison. He's actually allowed to work outside the prison. He's installing septic systems for them. He's working to try to save the government money as best as he can. He meets Dr. Frederick Cook, who was his cellmate briefly, who lied about being the first man to the North Pole. Kind of fun with that one. He's in prison because he uses the mail to defraud stockholders about the value of the company that he was president of at the time. Forbes comes out and starts trying to say that he wants to reevaluate prisons. He throws at the idea of prison with no walls. This prison was going to have a 3-foot-high walls with guard towers, waterless moats surrounding that are 30 feet wide, 30 feet deep. It's going to offer formal training in agriculture to offer jobs to prisoners afterwards. Requires illiterates to attend night school as a part of a parole. And he also wants prisoners to be paid a fair wage while working in the prison so they can send money back home to their families. He's trying to be a little bit more progressive. On the right, you'll see all these letters that are on file through Leavenworth, if you hunt him down hard enough, that he's sending out. There's a letter that he's writing to his mother, saying that some better keep your courage, your great love will give me new life, that he writes off to his mother. Down there at the bottom is a letter from his ex-wife, who still claims that she's Mrs. C.R. Forbes, which is interesting, to the warden saying, I haven't heard from him in a while, I hope you're taking good care of him. And then while he's still in prison, he is going to be a writer for the Leavenworth New Era, which is a little periodical for the prisoners. He writes about Hawaii and how beautiful it is and important people he's met, including Warren Harding. He also throws out the plan of Home au Bloc, which is a prefabricated home that literally sounds exactly what it is. It is a cube with no windows and a little spot that you can put a chimney in if you really want to, that you can put together and you're instantly able to move into. He tries to get his son from the first marriage, Russell, who's in construction, to jump on board, and Russell does not answer any of his letters because he doesn't want anything to do with them. And the whole thing falls apart. He is frequently denied parole. The government is ensuring that he will not be getting out any earlier than he has to. He's let out with good behavior on November 26, 1927, claims a pauper's oath to avoid a fine, and he, in the end, spent more time in prison than as the head of the Veterans Bureau. And at the end, he fades off into the sunset. He just kind of disappears. He does try to pop up once in a while. He testifies about narcotic use in federal prisons that he witnessed in Leavenworth. He proclaims that he's going to write a book about the Harding administration to prove that Warren was not a bad guy and had no faults. He also says that when Dr. Cook's out of prison, we're going to jump on an airplane and fly to the South Pole together. He makes a couple weird claims. But in the end, he just disappears. The last big thing he did, he wrote a couple articles for the newspapers about the Harding administration and his experiences. And from there, he tries his hand at owning a gas station, the Raymond service station in Pasadena. That's a picture of it up there. In the 50s, after Forbes is long gone, it's actually listed in the Library of Congress as the C.F. Forbes Service Center, service station, which is kind of interesting. But he tries that, doesn't really get too far. And he tries to sell coffee pots to restaurants and hotels. That doesn't go well. His wife, third wife, Catherine, passes her civil service exam and starts working for the General Accounting Office for the next 23 years. They live off of that, pretty much. And they go back and forth between Washington, D.C. and Boynton Beach, Florida. And in Boynton Beach, Forbes will be a member of the Chamber of Commerce. So he's doing pretty good. The thought is, though, no one recognized him anymore. He was going by Bob Forbes. No one recognized Bob Forbes and Kate Forbes as Colonel Forbes and Kate Mortimer. They were completely fine with these are just two normal people, and they fade out. Charles Forbes is going to die with complications from cancer at Walter Reed Hospital, Washington, D.C., and he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. The irony of it, though, is his funeral was held at the Old Post Chapel at Fort Myer. Fort Myer was where he was stationed when he deserted in 1900. So he ended up going full circle. Basically, at the end of this whole thing, where Forbes is always viewed as kind of this evil, evil person, I do view him as making poor decisions at times, kind of conflicted issues. But ultimately, I really do get a sense that he thought he was making great, aggressive decisions for veterans, and that's all that mattered. And he was blinded by that mission, and that led him down a road of trusting people he shouldn't have trusted, and also making a few enemies along the way. I do think that maybe isolated each event, if it was just one of them, he probably would have had a better legacy, but ultimately put all together, you're left with this nightmare that turns into Charles Forbes. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I know I steamrolled that one for the last 20 minutes. So, fantastic. Thank you very much.